Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from a very nice, a warm, actually sunny afternoon or evening. John and I, we're in the car shed in the office. We can see some members might have some problems. We see the number of participants nearly went up to nearly 100. So that's why we had to wait for a few more minutes, but nevertheless, we'll start. So welcome to the second webinar, which will focus on the most important month of the year, fishing-wise. That's the second webinar, and thank you for the positive comments which we had from those members that participated in the first one. The main focus will be obviously on mayfly, all about the mayfly, which we will cover comprehensively. And at the end, we will have question and answers. You can submit your question and answers through the buttons on Zoom. And before we start, oh, by the way, the webinar will be recorded and will be available in the next few days on the forum. But before we start, I'd just like to ask John to tell us a few words about, give us a summary of how the season has fared so far, and any other messages that you want to add, John.
Yeah, it's rather odd sat here because we can see each other on the screen and we can't see you. You can no doubt see us. So you're just talking into nowhere. There's clearly at the moment getting on for 100 people out there listening. So let's hope that we talk some sense. If people have come back, it probably means we talked some sense last time anyway. See how we do this. Outside, the sun is shining bright. The rivers are reasonable flows, but falling. It's been dry for the best part of 2 months. It contrasts completely with last year, when now we were only really just getting onto the water. And we've had a lot of anglers on the beats, and they've been catching a lot of fish. I know from the little beat at Barford, my local beat, we've had already 60 visits to the beat, and they're averaging somewhere 2.53 fish per visit out there. So we've got these almost summer levels in the river now. Hopefully the water that's in the aquifer will keep us about where we are, or at least for a while, because on the news today there's a lot of talk of drought and hosepipe bans, and we may have another year of that in contrast to what we have. So fishing and flies wise, hatches, I don't think we've seen Granham hatch off our waters in quite the numbers that we've seen this year. They were both thick hatches, they were extensive hatches, and they were prolonged for a period much longer than we normally see.
It was a full month, John. They started from the 1st of April.
Yeah, and often it's occurring every few days. This time it seems to have been consistently right through, and can only really put that down to the warmth. Down in the town, the usual event, thousands of the things, and because of what the keepers have done, they've now relocated them upstream to Durnford and to West Amesbury and beyond. And we've got fantastic Granham now back on the Avon in those places. I've been seeing plenty of olives on the tributaries where I tend to be fishing. I think it's thinner pickings for olives and others at places like Amesbury, and the sewage treatment works there is continuing to cause us worry. And we'll wait and see what the mayfly does there. Mayfly like the silty, slower water. That's Amesbury in large part. So fingers crossed we'll get something. Early mayfly are now being spotted. It is early, although they're there. The fish haven't really turned onto them yet. There are lots of yellow May dons, certainly on our tributaries, and Andreas has said they're also appearing in very large numbers over in Wales. I've never seen a hatch of yellow May dun, like the likes of which I saw the other night by the bridge in Barford. I was watching them mating in the air and falling onto the river and being snapped up. A fly that you will often read the trout don't like because they're bitter. Well, it doesn't seem so. I think it's all about how dense the hatch is.
Yeah, it's the numbers that seems to drive this feeding behavior. And for the first time in my 20 years with the club, I saw 2 yellow May duns being attacked on beat 12 and beat 18. And I wasn't quite sure that my eyesight was good enough until I heard another member who is probably listening to us, who said he was also saw a couple of yellow May duns being taken by fish on spate rivers in Wales or up north. It's a standard lunch or dinner. But yeah, that is watch this space, because Septaginids generally a very vulnerable species, and it's a good indication of water quality. But I go back to what you said about, yes, we do have some issues. Amesbury, we have 2 sewage water treatment plants, and we have the expanding population, etc. So it's not without problems, but the tributaries, they're much, much better.
Okay, fishing wise, we've got the first stocking into the rivers. We do some stocking into those places where the habitat is poor and the fishing pressure is great. We continue to do that. It's around about 2,000 fish. The first batch have gone into the Avon at West Amesbury, here at Durnford, and up at Countess. So they're there getting ready for the mayfly hatch. We may want to talk some more about stocking policy in the questions. People have asked me questions about it, and certainly there's a lot to be said. And there is some EA research. People will have remembered the tag-in last year. Those research results are about to be published, and to be honest, they don't speak well of the value of stocking, considering what it costs us to do that. Most of the fish that have been caught on our rivers so far will be wild fish. Certainly all of them on the tributaries. There'll be some stockies from last year being caught on the Avon. The vast majority of fish that you're catching are wild fish. So the old idea that there wouldn't be any fishing until we started shoving fish in from the hatcheries probably doesn't hold water.
And I think, John, it's probably more important now to think that because of the weather changes and the unpredictability and the extremes of weather, from flooding to dry water to dry weather, a fish that's been born in the river from an egg stage, and it will handle these extremes much better than a stockie.
And the genetics alone must tell us that. The lakes will be slowing down now. The last fish have gone in, temperatures are going up. At the end of this month, fishing will stop on the lakes. And I am hearing from members that they're enjoying the fishing on the lakes. Somebody spoke about very good evening rises at Hamer, and that's a lake where we know there's a lot of good natural fly life. And it does fish much more naturally, more like the rivers than say Leominstead. We've got the weed gates in at Durnford after our usual struggles with permissions, etc. Weed cutting in this first period is likely to be very light. It shouldn't bother you too much, but later on in the season, if we continue with this amount of light out there, it's very probable that there'll be a lot more weed around. Now, I wanted to talk a bit about Amesbury. This isn't about mayfly, and it isn't really about the fishing, but it is about our property and really the values of our club. Amesbury fisheries are getting a lot of attention from our bailiff team because of the incursions from youngsters. Poaching, mostly spinning, heavy line, treble hooks. Sometimes they're leaving this hanging on telephone wires and in bushes. There's damage to our gates, damage to our fences and return boxes, fences pulled over and wire cut. Litter. The keepers tried to put it all back together again on the principle that if you once let it start going downhill, it'll continue to go downhill very rapidly. So we want to keep it in order. That's very important to us. And the bailiffs, the bailiff coordinator, Andy Stafford, is reporting everything that's happening to us. This is costing our club quite a lot of money. To send a keeper out there with the right tools and the right equipment to make a repair to one of our fences will be £200, £250, perhaps more a go. I think in the last couple of years, we've probably had more than £2,000 worth of damage. A damaged gate needing to be replaced is £400, £500. So it's serious stuff. We are passing everything on to the police. Yeah. We are told that if we don't make reports, then nothing will happen. The police identify hotspots before they start putting resources into it. Andy's in touch with the rural crimes team. And Andy is speaking to members when they send in reports. One of our members recently came across some youngsters at Amesbury that were none too pleasant. He made a report himself to the police, but Andy followed that up as well. And Andy's keen to hear from any of you. His details are in the yearbook. But to go on to say really that this is a problem for us all. We're all part of this club. We own it. We want to keep it in good condition. And individual members are empowered to check that the next person along the bank is actually a member, that they've got their book on them, that they're properly signed up, etc. You can act as bailiffs. We're not asking you to put yourself at risk. Polite inquiry is all we ask. The wrong uns will probably run off the moment they spot you. There's very little suggestion that they are offering violence of any sort. They disappear quite quickly. So I think it's important because Amesbury will start to get very busy in the next few weeks. The more people we've got on the banks, the better, and the more of those people that are aware what's happening and speak up, the better. Yes, some of us are older and maybe not feeling as strong as we might, but those who want to, those who can, please speak to them, tell them it's private, tell them it's private fishing, tell them they can join the club if they want to. We do tolerate the youngsters fishing in the hatch pool below ham hatches. We don't tolerate them casting upstream with spinners from the hatch. But we don't tolerate adults fishing, and we don't tolerate incursions deep into the fishery where they're having to go through our locks and gates. So it's been an issue last year and this. The good weather doesn't help. Everybody wants to go down by the river. So please, as members, help us out. I don't know whether you want to add anything, Andreas.
No, John. I think you've covered it. We are trying all routes possible, and certainly the rural crime team, as you said, they're fully aware. Every incident is being reported. We keep photographing, registering the damage to our property that has been done. Also, we are in contact with the recreation ground management team, because that's where they play football, etc. We're also in contact with the local council, because it's a joint responsibility. In the same way that the council a number of times will say, look, there's a fallen tree, can you go and sort it out, please? And we go and sort it out, although it may not be on our land. At the same time, they have to help us to identify, the culprits. But it is disheartening. It is disheartening because there's a lot of effort that we're putting jointly as committee, bailiffs and keepers. So I think John is quite right when he says, well, a polite word that, look, actually, it's private, you shouldn't be here. In most cases, they leave.
Yeah. Any insecure gates or fences cut, any damage that you find, please report it through to the keepers or to Andy so that we can deal with it swiftly. Our neighbour has had the same problem. The person who owns the centre ground at the Big Meander at Amesbury, Jason Mackey, has had cameras stolen, and some of the trees he planted uprooted. He planted those trees for the public to enjoy and put seats in among them, gave up a bit of his private ground. And he's suffered the same kind of vandalism. So between Jason, ourselves, the football club, the council, the police and everybody else, we want to try to get on top of it.
So the other thing, the only last thing to say is that please, please, please do not leave the padlock codes unscrambled. I understand that if it's dark and you can't see well, you have to put your glasses on, etc. But you know, we have a number of times that the keepers inform us that they'll go visit fisheries, and the padlocks have been left into the combination code. Please scrabble them. This is
Squeeze the padlock shut and spin the numbers with your finger. You only need to move one to lock it. But please move all four. Because we don't want them knowing the code or any part of it. You may have noticed that we've got a different system for changing the codes this year. It's being done through Clubmate, and we will be able to change the codes more quickly and to issue information. Last time we had to do that, it did bother a few people who arrived without having taken a look, but they could, if they had their phone, have got that code there and then on the bank.
So, time to talk about the most exciting thing, which is the mayfly.
Yeah.
Now, where do you want to start? Shall we start with etiquette?
Yeah, we talked about etiquette last time, and I commended Gordon Mackey's piece in our yearbook, How to Approach a Chalk Stream, and I commended our 21st Century Anthology, which as homework for these webinars, I've been rereading. And to be honest, bloody hell, it's a good book, even though I was one of the authors. I think of all the questions I've been asked over the years on the fisheries, it answers them all. It is all there, and it's still available for sale here at the Cart Shed. So I recommend that, and I particularly recommend Gordon. This is the bit I read today on etiquette and approaching a chalk stream.
And that becomes a lot more important because, you know, I have seen, I don't know about you, but I have seen a few elderly gentlemen that they revert to kids wearing, you know, shorts, and who's going to go first to get the big one.
Exciting times. So why is etiquette going to be a subject at Mayfly when it was a subject at the early part of the season? Because it never changes, but because also the pressure is on. The members are out on the water in significant numbers. Those difficulties and clashes and misunderstandings are much more likely to occur at this period than at any other. Also, the fish are leaping in and out of the water like crazy things, and some of the rules, the codes by which we live, don't allow us to dart up and down the bank, chucking a fly at everything that moves behind us, in front of us, off the bridge, whatever. The main thing with these chalk streams is the upstream method, working through a beat in an upstream direction. And it's that can lead to issues, particularly on a wading beat, if someone's going through very slowly, if someone jumps up ahead into that part of the wading beat, someone's getting anxious behind, fish are rising and people want to get at them. You do need to know which is rightly your fish and which is the other fella's fish. We fish our half of the river. We don't fish the opposite bank. If both sides of the river are lined, then you've got half each. You don't chuck right across to the fish that's rising at the feet of the fella on the opposite bank. There are all these things that will make a difference. So the etiquette is the same at Mayfly, only it's 10 times the more important, really. Amesbury and its like, and I'm thinking of Countess and Stonehenge and Stapleford, where they are not controlled by a beat system like we've got here at Amesbury. You make up your own rules on the bank. It's important, therefore, to divide the fishery up fairly and sensibly between you, taking into account the upstream etiquette and the upstream dry fly etiquette on those places where nymphs aren't allowed. rises might be happening all over the place, but don't chase after every single plop that occurs. Go for the one that's rightly yours, as I say. Talking to the other anglers is extremely important. Come to an agreement as to who's fishing where. If you do want to go up ahead of somebody who's taking an awful long time on a beat, please say so, ask. You, according to the codes, shouldn't do that. You should wait your turn. We're not as rigid as, say, the fishermen on the salmon beats in Scotland, where you all proceed down precisely in order, taking your turn and return back up again, taking your number and back through again. We're not as rigid as that. We can speak to one another and sort it out between ourselves. Don't take tags, sign in, and then go off for breakfast. It's something I've noticed before, and I've noticed it this year. People will hope that they can book on a beat early, knowing that things are busy, but maybe just pop back to their camper van for a cup of tea or something. Please try to be reasonable and take what's available to you. If a water's too busy, there's always somewhere on the tributaries. Don't cast to any old rise. Don't fish from the bridges. Don't fish downstream. Keep it slow, polite, and civilized. And enjoy the fishing.
Good.
It's as simple as that. I have taken from Gordon's piece today the same old message that I've tried to get out there several times before, and it's that one of knowing when to stop. In the heavy hatches and the busy times, knowing when to stop is so important. And this is about sharing the fishing with others, leaving something for the next fella along. It might be that there are several smaller fish that you could fish for. You don't have to catch them all. There's a slightly better one, just up ahead. Go for that one. Leave some for somebody else. Be measured about it. We're a big club and a busy club, and some of our water is quite delicate. Particularly on the tributaries where we're not docking. And I did have one of our owners actually sent me a message one evening. He looked in the book and he said, just a quick one, John. Member signed in and says he's caught 12 fish. Is that really okay on a small water? Well, of course, you can do it, but is it the right thing to do when we're busy? And there are others on water as well. So difficult message. It sounds like we're trying to spoil the fun, but nonetheless, it's important under this etiquette heading. Thanks.
Right, so we can dive into the mayfly. And I think it'll be fair if we start by sharing the mayfly life cycle, because this is where it all starts. So we're starting from the egg stage. So there's these eggs that you can see that developing into a smallish larvae. They're being deposited by the female mature spinners or imagos. And they take up to 2 years to hatch. Now, what we have noticed is over the years that some of them they are into a 1 year cycle. They're called the yearlings, and therefore we'll talk later on about the size of hooks. It's not really necessary. In fact, I would advise you against using size 10s and 8 hooks, which you may use in other rivers, because our mayflies, they tend to fit in within the size 12.
I think size 12 is the minimum, but I'd go for a 14.
14s as well.
If you can find them. The fly tyers are making them on the big hooks, and generally we want them 12, 14.
Yeah. So the hatching egg then gradually grows into the nymph. The nymphs, they are burrowers. They live in the silt, not in any silt. It has to be structured silt on the sides of the rivers where the silt is deposited through the winter flows. That's where they live. And they've got these lovely gills on the back, and they move them, and this is how they oxygenate themselves. So at some point after 1 to 2 years, the duns or the sub-imago, the immature adult flies, they start hatching, and they are very important. They are very important because in the initial stages, if you go out now, for example, at Durnford or Amesbury, you tend to see a lot more of the duns. So they haven't actually built up yet the population of mature adults, males and females.
And these flies have gone into the bushes and the vegetation around the river. They're not yet returning to the river. This is the hatch proper. This is the moment that they hatch from the river, though everything that follows from this point on in the life cycle is often referred to as the hatch by the angler. In fact, they hatched a couple of days ago, and then the rest of it is when the fishing occurs. Probably there's some fishing at the moment of the hatch. The trout take them then, and certainly there's much more fishing when they return to the river at a later stage.
So then at some point, the population of mature adult mayflies builds up, and then they start going through their mating process, and they become spinners or imagos, and at the end they are depositing their eggs in the river. You'll see the females dipping in their abdomen in the water a few times, and at the end, after they release their eggs, which the eggs sort of been taken by the flow, and they get into the right place in the structured silt where they'll live for another couple of years. And then, of course, the importance of the spent or the dying or dead females and males, it's much more, it's higher importance to fish the spent mayflies rather than the duns, the
hatching phase.
hatching phase.
And this is often the evening that we're talking about, that this is occurring. You'll have seen the flies in the air, rising and falling. They'll be mating, and then later on they'll be returning to the river, and they'll be dipping and laying the eggs. And at that point, they're very vulnerable.
So now putting some of the practical tips there. Okay, so mayfly duns or sub-imagos, they're hugely important in the initial stages. Then the spent mayflies, they become also equally important. And the nymphs, they're actually not as important, because mayfly fishing is all about dry fly fishing. At the back end of the season, yes, you can have a mayfly nymph imitation when allowed. You know, the dates in the book is, July, from July onwards. So let's just look at some traditional examples, and we can have a conversation whether, because some of them you use, some of them I use. So grey wolf, it's a great fly. I use it. I don't know about you, John, and what are your thoughts?
In all sorts of sizes, and it in the right sizes, it represents the mayfly pretty well. I think when they're battered and chewed up, they can represent the spent very well. Smaller sizes of grey wolf can represent other olives and other things. I think it's a very good general purpose fly, and I certainly would count it as one of my two chief mayfly patterns in various sizes. Little ones, 16s, 18s, but 14 during the hatch.
So let's look at another one, French partridge.
I like the French partridge, not just because I find it quite easy to tie, but I also just think it's a great fly. Again, it has very wide use. I think if you keep it nice and dry and on the surface, it can represent the adult very well. If you get it battered and wet, it can represent the spent equally well. And I was telling Andreas earlier, I learnt today on recommendation from an angler I know about a fly called Bucky's Love Child. And quite clearly looking at this thing, its parents are the French partridge and the grey wolf. It's like a French partridge with a grey body. It's a fulling mill thing. And I looked on their site and they've sold out. So it's obviously become very popular.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. It's a cross between a French partridge and a grey wolf. And they do the job. Undoubtedly, they do the job. If you had nothing else in your box, you'd catch fish at mayfly time with those two.
And the other thing is that something about the silhouette, so the flies that we share in this webinar, they're more, if I can call them, aerodynamic compared with some of the other ones that they've got materials like hard plastic and some wings that
there are those with feathered wings outflowing, which I've tried in years gone by, and there's plenty of them for sale all over the internet and the fly shops. They're absolute hell to cast. They will take flight of their own accord and glide where they want to go, and they'll spin and turn and play havoc with the leader. So
yes,
I wouldn't be recommending those. Very beautifully tied, and no doubt if you're able to cast them to the right place, very successful flies. These more generic patterns, I think, will do the job better, certainly just as well.
Okay, let's see what else. Charles Jardine, May Fly Emerger. What's an emerger, John?
Well, an emerger is the fly struggling out of its old body shell. It's shook in the surface of the water. It may be caught in the surface film, and some of them might never manage even to emerge from that surface film, and then they're known as crippled. And it's another very vulnerable stage. And so the mayfly emerger represents that stage where it's half in, half out of the shook, struggling in the surface film, and the fish finds it a very easy target.
Okay. So, and thankfully, we consider in our club that as an emerger is a dry fly.
We've had some debates, and I think we have a member of the committee who shall remain nameless, who still says that clinkhammers are the devil's work and not dry flies. But we do allow the emerger. What is hanging in the film, maybe tail through the film,
yes,
we regard as a dry fly if, say, 3/4 of it is out on the surface.
yes.
It's not a wet fly. It's not under the surface.
True, it's not a nymph. So, and then there's another imitation of a hatching emerger.
An emerger. Loop wings are very good because they float very well. You get a lot of air bubbles in the loop.
And you see the imitation of the unfolding wings from the wing case in the back.
Yeah.
So
a very useful pattern, I find. I used to use a lot of loop wings, but less now. Loop wing CDCs in the smaller patterns are quite useful as well. It's just a nice way to catch a bit of air and float the thing.
And you'll see the detail that the hackle on the bottom has been cut so that then it sits in the film, imitating where exactly they are. That's a good fly. And similar to the Mohican mayfly.
There are all sorts of patterns now of detached body. I've tied detached bodies with all sorts of different materials, some sort of rubber material, some bits of bandage, all sorts of ways of doing it. I've always been suspicious of them because I don't like too far away from the hook itself. It always seems to me that it's possible the fish will get hold of something that hasn't got a hook in it. But that's just me. They work very, very well for people, but I'm just suspicious. I have them in my box. I very rarely use them.
Well, let's see. And now we've gone to the stage. So we covered the hatching downs, or both the full adult dun, which is floating downstream, and also we saw examples of the emerger, which is in the stage that they're just hitting the top of the surface. But we go now into the spinner. You can see the tails, how long they are. They're very important because they're like the rudder when they're dancing up and down. And that's a spent spinner. Obviously, there are spent mayfly imitations.
There are, and sometimes I guess a bit like this one, they don't look too imitative, but they do the job. I mean, that's the kind of thing I would have in my box. I do use spent mayfly patterns,
Yeah.
And I think they have their time on the water, and it's when the evening's getting late, the flies have laid their eggs and they're starting to die in numbers, then floating one of these down can make all the difference. I would say, though, that it's often also the time to put a small Adams or black gnat or Griffith's gnat or something on, because the fish may not be looking for mayfly at that time.
Yeah.
And I've certainly had evenings where people using mayflies getting on, stick on a black gnat and you get fish.
And another spent mayfly imitation, typical, is this sort of cross-like
more imitative
silhouette.
That one.
Yes.
And the feather wings, more important. The tail's shorter there, but
Shorter, yeah.
there is a test keeper, I can't remember his name now, who designed flies with very, very long tails and were reportedly very successful because the tail was being seen as a trigger. That, you know, extending that thing made the fish take it.
Yeah. And finally, as I said earlier, that's a lovely photograph of the real nymph, and these we can see the gills that they're using in the burrows in the tunnels.
Is that one of Cyril's pictures?
Yes, all the yeah.
The club is very fortunate to have
Absolutely.
Cyril's catalogue of photographs of all these things. I think it's something quite unique that he has given to the club, and it's available.
Absolutely. And that's sort of a classic, and you can't better that, to be honest.
No.
If you are going to use a nymph later on after 1st of July, Walker's Mayfly nymph,
yeah, by the time they've been in the river a few months, they'll have gained some size, and it might be that come the autumn, a nymph pattern like that will do some good, but you won't be using it on most of our waters here on the Avon before June the 1st, by virtue of the rules.
July the 1st,
July the 1st.
Yeah.
And it probably isn't a sensible thing to use in any case.
Yes. So we'll stop sharing now. We'll talk a little bit more about the tactics and some of the details. And by the way, before we go there, one of the flies that I have found particularly successful for the spent mayflies, believe it or not, is the daddies, foam daddies. Now, don't ask me why, but foam daddies in particular, ordinary daddies as well, but foam daddies, they're very successful during spinnerfuls. It's one of these wacky things that somehow fish like. And so we talked about the habitat, we talked about life cycle, we talked about the life cycle. Now, so what are the right beats to fish? Where are these mayflies?
Where are the mayflies?
Yes.
When we sat here last time, early season tactic, we talked about the fish being in the shallow water, the rippling water, the faster water. Well, not now. They will return to those deeper, slower stretches where the silt is lying, where the mayfly are hatching. And in my mind at the moment is one pool where you won't see a trout most of the year. And then at this time of year, they arrive in the pool and they feed voraciously on the mayfly that are in there. Later in the season, they're gone again. It's more of a coarse pool than a trout pool, but they appear there at that time. So they're in the deeper water, they're in the slower water, wherever that condition exists for the mayfly to be. And the mayfly won't go very far once they hatch. They'll go to the nearest bushes and trees and hang about there. They won't be flying off miles unless there's a big wind blowing, then they might get blown away. So they'll be close to where they hatched, and they'll return to the river at that point. And I always find you've got to look up in the air when you arrive in the early evening to see them. You won't know they're there if your eyes are down staring at the water, but if you look up beyond the trees, you will see things in the air that you wouldn't otherwise see.
Which illustrates the importance of having the marginal vegetation, how long, how is your the fringe, and also how many trees you have around.
Absolutely, and it's the same with the granum. If you kick through the grass along the riverside, and it's normally quite short grass at that time, or if you beat the bushes with a stick, the granum fly out in thousands, because this is where they go, the nearest quiet perch off the river before their rest of their lives are completed, mating and dropping back into the water. They don't go very far.
So, but your point again with that, because they're silt burrowers, you will get them in the faster sections, but they'll be on the sides, always on the sides. When you see where they're hatching, is where there is the accumulation of, silt over the winter. So we often hear, John, about the Duffer's fortnight. How true is the Duffer's fortnight?
Well, I guess it's written about. I'm not sure I've ever found it to be the Duffer's fortnight. It's not that easy. There are times when it is, but there are also times when it's utterly frustrating. When you can't catch a fish to save yourself, even though all the activity that you're looking for is there. The flies are on the water, the fish are rising, but you can't get one. So I do think you have to understand the fly, the process, and everything else when you're doing it. And you have to.
So how's the process? Just walk us through what happens. So we start seeing now some mayflies, and they are passed unmolested. Why is this happening?
Well, the fish may be full. That's one of the reasons. They may be full, they may not be interested, but they will go for them at that vulnerable stage. The air might be full of them, but they're not going to leap out to get them. Occasionally that will happen.
But they relearn every year.
I think they do.
That's the important.
They're very slow to start with.
Very slow.
Yeah, and they're suspicious of the big fly, I guess.
Yeah, and the other thing that happens, at some point they switch on.
Yeah.
And when they switch on, they go bonkers, but not for a fortnight. It's probably 3 to 4 days, at least in my experience, if you're lucky.
I used to take some time off work at the end of May for mayfly, and I would some years miss it. It hadn't started yet, or it had been and gone. I think things are different these days. The fly is less dense, and it lasts longer, so they're around late into the year. You don't get quite the same intense period of mayfly action that maybe you once did, and I think people imagine something very special with fish leaping out all over the river, and that can happen.
It can happen.
As it can happen with granum and other flies. But more often, the rise forms will be quiet little rise forms, because you don't have to work very hard to eat dead mayflies. So it'll just be a fish just coming up and sipping, coming up and sipping. You won't get this leap. Smaller fish will tend to be the ones doing that. They'll sometimes have a slash at them. And talking the other evening with other anglers, they were talking of the mayflies being hit by the fish, but not necessarily taken in the mouth. And people were presenting mayflies to them, and I actually hooked one in the belly as a result. The only time I put a mayfly pattern on that evening, I got a fish, but it hooked itself in the belly. And there is this thought that they're throwing themselves at the fly in an attempt to drown it, where it's easier to eat. Lying in the water. So there's lots of different things going on with them that you need to understand. And as usual, it's take it slowly, watch what's happening, observe, and try to present in the way that the fish seem to be liking.
So and so what happens is at first the fish relearning to that this is food. Then they got this period of switching on gradually. There's probably 3 or 4 or 5 days where, yes, they go bonkers. And then, of course, what happens, they see us, they see a lot of us, they see every imitation going. So this is when fishing pressure starts making them very, very skittish. Now, the initial hatches, they always tend to be in the afternoon, 4 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, preferably if it's a cloudy and muggy day, and then gradually the hatch window opens up. So you'll see them hatching from 9, 10 o'clock in the morning throughout the day. And that's the progress of hatches. And then, of course, the more mature adult males or female mayflies build up, then the spinafores start. So this is one of the difficulties, because you have, for us anglers, not for the fish, because the fish, they're gorging themselves. It's the fact that you may have a day where you had a very good done hatch, and the fish gorge themselves. And then what happens is in the evening, there's a superb spinafore hatch. And then you find out the fish, they're absolutely stuffed and they don't eat anything. They won't hatch a spinner. Equally, in the morning, towards the later stages of the hatching period, you'll have hardly any dance hatching, and then they'll be feeding almost exclusively on spinners. But is there any difference between when the hatches take place on the Avon versus the Wiley versus the Nada?
Yes, I think there is. They're all about the same time of the year, but they're separated by a few weeks, a few days, and the hatches don't begin all in the same place on the river. They start and they move down. On the Nada, I think they move up. You hear of mayfly further down the Nada than higher up, first of all. On the Avon, Andreas will tell you they move down.
Yes.
They start hatching upstream, and over about a fortnight, they'll have moved their way through.
Yeah.
But they don't just exist up here on the waters above Stratford Sub-Castle, the trout waters. They're all the way down the river. So there are great big hatches down below us on the mixed fisheries, and well worth a visit.
Yes, absolutely. But there's clearly, I mean, in the 20 years that I've been with the club and keeping a diary, certainly the move, that the hatches move from north to south. So you're likely to encounter mayflies at Darrington and Stonehenge and Amesbury, perhaps 2 weeks before Durnford. And of course, what happens is it's not a generic thing that you can apply and say, okay, mayflies, they're hatching everywhere. No, they're not. Because when the fish, they're in the stage of going bonkers and really, you know, just they're throwing away all caution. At Amesbury, here, they haven't even started eating or taking the mayflies. So that's important. I think one of the other things, and you said it, that sometimes what tends to happen, now we're going into fishing tactics, which is the observation. So the observation and the patience that you need when you're out there fishing, because you hit a day where there's mayflies everywhere, and of course fish, they're taking mayflies, and then you're targeting a fish. And you say, what's the matter with that fish? You're casting, because you look, but you don't see that this fish is taking midges, it's taking olives, it's taking something different.
And a switch to a small fly can make the difference.
Yeah.
On an evening when the mayflies aren't being taken.
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, lots of anglers will talk of that puzzle. It looks as if it's mayfly time, but they're not interested at that moment.
Yeah. So it's getting gradually, but because of the fishing pressure and because, of course, they because they learn, and they learn very, very fast, because you know they're being caught or they've been pricked, or and this is where it's getting important to observe a particular fish for some time before you cast, because it's the rise form and what they're doing. You see them sometimes. You can see that they might take every second or third mayfly. There's a pattern which happens. So
yeah, don't chuck the fly at it.
don't
as
chuck the
soon as
fly
it
at it. Exactly.
rises, because that can put it down. Wait a little while, see what the pattern is. That's certainly true.
Exactly.
And yeah, worth thinking about those things.
And anything to say about the setup? Rod and reel and line and length of rod, tippet.
You're dealing with a bigger fly than you might normally be casting. So you've got to think about that. You've got to think about turning that over so that it lands softly and correctly. You probably need just a little more strength in your tippet than you might otherwise have had. You don't want too much fly line out on the water. If there's a lot of fish moving, then you'll easily line groups of fish that are closer to you, and if you spook one further downstream, it'll spook the rest upstream. So long leaders, I think, are going to be important. Casting sparingly, don't get overexcited, which is very easy to do. I think just think, plan, cast well.
Yeah. The casting sparingly again is a classic one. I've often seen some of our members, they'll be parked literally on the spot, and they'll be sort of casting, and you often wonder, okay, are they targeting a fish? Well, probably not, because you know it's just it's probably something which has been left from the initial experience of fishing put and take lakes, where you're casting out your nymph and you're hoping that a rainbow salmon's going to grab it. Whereas
and false casting to dry the fly. Some of these mayflies, the French partridge in particular, will get very wet.
yes,
Throwing it backwards and forwards over the water to dry it out
it's not good.
is a no-no. It's a waste of your time. Do that over the meadow nearby, by all means.
Yeah.
Out of sight, offline from where you're fishing.
Yeah.
Dry the fly that way, but certainly don't just keep casting to dry it out and then throw it.
So we're not. That's the thing. We're not chalkstream fishing. We're not fishing the water. We are stalkers. That's the thing. And you lay out a plan. You observe a fish. You got your target. You know how to approach it, at which angle, and you're trying to make your first cast count. That's the big difference. Now
landing it right. In the right place, just ahead of the fish, so it drifts into the fish's window. Not thumping into the water because you're overexcited either side of the fish. Slightly off to one side is often said to be of value as well, so that the fish moves sideways. I read that in Gordon Mackey's book today, that you're more likely to hook them in the mouth if they've moved slightly sideways, either way.
The interesting thing is that there are some fish seem to have like a dominant eye.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're casting on the left, and casting on the left, it doesn't work. And then if you try it on the other side,
down the other side.
Yeah. Run it down the other side.
Yeah.
Something to the other thing is that it's what happens is this what we call a strike. Well, a strike is particularly when it comes to mayfly, because mayfly will bring up the bigger fish. And of course, you need to have something robust, probably a 5x tippet, which will be 4.5 pounds, breaking strain. Of course, if you strike a 2-pounder, whether you have 5x or 4x or whatever, if you go like that, that's it. Bye fish, bye. You'll break your leader. And so, and the other thing is that it's more like a strike is not the right word. It's a lift.
Yeah.
Because essentially what happens, the fish, if you study what it does, is you'll see the mayfly coming, and you will drop back and then gently take it. Now, if you watch, there's a lot of YouTube videos. If you watch how the fish behave, in slow motion, you see the fish takes the fly, drowns it, and hooks itself. Because most of the fish, they're hooked on the side.
It's gone through.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And that's the trick. It's all about timing. I know it's difficult. I know that you tend to overreact sometimes, but that's
And the big strike with a little fish can send it back over your head into the trees behind you if you're not careful. And you're overexcited. So yes, it is lift. Lift's a much better word, and we should take strike out of the textbooks. Really,
it is a lift, and again, the importance of, again, that's a very personal choice. The members have some like faster rods, some like sort of more of medium to soft rods. Obviously, a softer rod will actually cushion the strike or the lift, and you get much better chance to tire the fish compared to a tippy rod. So the only other thing which I want to say is that, and you mentioned it, we do have, it seems that the hatches, the duration and the intensity has changed over the years, meaning that you used to have fantastic mayfly hatches that didn't last that long. But what we have seen is it can go until the middle of August sometimes.
Certainly on into that part of the year when you're almost expecting the daddies to appear.
Exactly.
And it goes on and on.
Yeah.
Though they may not be as excited about it, the fish that is, as they were earlier in that part, but the mayflies are still there. But the summer months will see our members depart for Spain or Greece or wherever they go when the waters go quieter. These next few weeks will be our very, very busy period, and the fish will be willing, but some waters out here at Durnford, up at Amesbury, will get a lot of visitors. And when you think about the fact that on some of our other waters, less so here, they're all wild fish. They are getting pricked, not necessarily getting caught every time. So there will come a time when they've had enough.
Yeah.
And the number of fish in the river, we know what that is in every 100 meters because the EA come and do surveys for us. We know they're there. It's just catching them. And I suppose it's time to mention our courses and our open day, these webinars, all those opportunities to learn how to fish, because Andreas hears there's no fish in the river over and over again.
I do. They say
that's never the case.
The reason that we don't catch fish is the latest things I heard from a member that is because we don't stock the rivers.
No, the rivers are full of fish. It's our skills that's different.
Yeah.
There are members, and I'm not one of them, but there are members in the club who will go out every time and catch a bag full of fish. It is skills. You may not want to fish that way, but the competition fishermen with the Euro nymphing and all the rest, they'll get fish. If you stick to the dry fly, you'll find it a bit harder because that's only a small percentage of the fish's diet. But it's the nicest way.
But that's the sport.
That's the sport.
I mean, I said earlier,
it's tempting that wild fish with the right fly, fly that it's feeding on, delivered in the right way. Yeah. A skilled cast to the right place to a good fish, not just any fish, a good fish.
So, yeah, it's fly fishing is integrated. You need the fly and you need the fishing, but we find out in our times that there's a lot more focus on the fishing and the catching and the numbers.
Yeah, and members will say to us, I don't know much about entomology. And you think, well, why are you fly fishing then? True. You might as well be down on the lakes with the maggots. Unless you know about fly fishing, then you're not really playing the upstream game.
One of the things which I wanted to also add is the importance of weather. What is good fishing weather for us is not good fishing weather for the fish. So if you're expecting to come out on a lovely spring day and enjoy the sunshine, that's absolutely fine. and you can have your cup of tea or read your paper, etc. But the fishing weather for the fish is different, particularly the mayfly. There's been occasions that it's been pouring down with rain, and I remember one of our members, he rang from London and he said, look, it's going to be very, very rainy today. Shall I come down? And my answer was, have you got a good, raincoat with it, something? And he said, yes. I said, come down. He went and fished Amesbury. And then he rang me. He says, I couldn't believe it. Of course, what happens is there's no one on the water. There's big droplets of rain. The mayflies, they're agonizingly trying to take off. They're being hit by the rain. So yeah, rainy days, muggy, cloudy days, they're better. Trout and any fish don't really enjoy so much the sunshine.
And as the months go on, the sport moves more into the evenings. It's no good going home for your tea at 5 o'clock. Because that's when it's going to start a little bit later on. So I'm aware of the time. So shall we look at some of the questions that we have? Andy made a comment and he's right. He says this relates to the members challenging possible intruders on the banks. Andy says avoid confrontation, walk away if necessary. Yes, please don't put yourself at any risk, but a polite approach will generally be fine.
And Nigel Pickford is asking any recommendations for French partridge sizes?
Well, I would say the same as we said about the grey wolf. Don't go less than 12. These flies are advertised at 10 and 8. I wouldn't buy flies of that size. The biggest I would buy would be a 12, but I'd generally be fishing 14.
14s, I'm the same.
And 16 even.
One thing to say about the size of the fly, the female, population-wise, and this is not me talking because I'm not a biologist, this is Dr. Cyril Bennett, you tend to have more male, comparatively speaking, than female. Now the females is a size 12 because they're bigger. So you have more males, so the chances are that you'll see more of the adult, the actual flies that they fit in within this 14 size. And there's also something else. Let's not forget that we've got the mayflies until sometimes August, and these are the yearlings. And because they hatch after a year, they're smaller.
Much smaller.
So size 14.
Quite noticeably smaller than the 2.
That's right. And size 14 seems to be, if you look at opportunities, it's a better one to use. Lindsay made a comment that mayflies hatching and fish are feeding on parsnips on the test. The test is a very interesting one because the Duffus fortnight does work on the test. It's short. It's a 2-week roughly period, but they don't have these prolonged hatches that we have on that, and they start earlier. So let's see what else. Gordon Mudge, are you going on to talk about tactics, fly line, leader length, and also the season when there are plenty of mayfly, but fish are ignoring them? Okay. I think we touched on the actual the size. So it's a standard 8 or 9 foot rod with a 4 or 5 weight line. I use a 5 weight line only because sometimes you got wind, so you need to cut through the wind. The leader length, my advice is, I know the old match the size of the rod with the size of the leader and tippet, which is typically, if you've got a 9 foot rod, you put 9 foot leader and tippet. My personal recommendation will be fish with the longest leader you can get away with.
What you can manage to turn over.
What you can manage to turn over
successfully. If you've got too much leader and you're not able to successfully turn it, then go a little bit shorter. 9 foot minimum. You don't want to be less than that, but
Yeah. So and the second part is a very interesting one. Second part of the question: at the end of the season, when there are plenty of mayfly, but fish are ignoring them because they've had enough. This is the glut, and this is when you're gradually moving into the summer months, and this is where you see them smutting. They're taking those minute simulids or smuts that they're sort of size
Just
20,
tipping in the surface.
tipping in the surface. And this is the time where, that's why from July we allow the nymph fishing, and nymph fishing in that respect of targeting, you have a visual connection with the fish and you target the fish. It's a very, very skillful thing to do.
And by that time of year, the fish aren't exhausting themselves to get at food. They're moving only a very short distance. If they're nymphing, they're going sideways. If they're rising to something, it's just a gentle sitting in one place, coming up, taking the fly. And this is when the small flies start to have their place. And in some cases, the very small flies. This is when the guys with the 22s and the 24s come out.
Because you're moving, essentially, that's the time when you're moving into the summer period, and we will have another webinar on summer tactics. So you're talking about end of June, so July, August, you're talking about fish moving more into very early morning feeding, very late.
Into the dark.
Into the dark. And you're talking about they'll be going into the small, very small olives. I mean, we're talking about sizes 20, 22. They'll be going for pearl wateries.
The tiny little light-coloured olives.
For blooming olives. They'll be going for the smuts. They'll be going for midges. They'll be going for end sedges. That is, the summer sedges is something that can make a difference, particularly at dusk, because so a more difficult period, and then that we have to fit in with the dinner schedule of the fish, because what typically happens is, and I know we have a number of associate members, and some of them that drive from London or Essex or whatever, so they leave the water like at 7 o'clock, because obviously they need to drive back. Now, and one needs to be on the water at 7 o'clock to tackle that, take it easy, connect with the river, nature, and then the fish will start taking after 8 o'clock into the darkness, and the best fish, they'll be right in the darkness, particularly trout. It's interesting, July and August, grayling, they're a lot more obliging. But the better fish, trout, they'll be in the darkness, like 10 o'clock or 10:30.
Yeah, and you won't be seeing the bigger rises that you see earlier in the season. They'll have found themselves a place and they'll be sipping away quietly.
So Hans Startis is asking a question that's been reading Peter Hayes' latest book, The Flies That Fish Prefer. He suggests a vulnerability in the flies we tie is an important trigger, absolutely, for trout. It's why a lucky fly well beaten up by trout often does better.
Absolutely so. We've all found that, haven't we?
We do.
Hanging off the fly, it's come untied, it's trailing along in the water. Awful looking thing. And it's the one that catches the fish.
It's true. And he's documented that by some video, underwater video. And you can clearly see that they're so clever, the fish. They'll say, okay, well, I'm not going to spend energy to go after this one because that one is nearly gone. But there's another one which is a struggler because one wing is not working properly. And that's true.
And I suppose that is a highly imitative tie-in form, isn't it? That you're imitating the crippled fly. And a very important thing too. Nothing wrong with that.
Dennis Wright has got a question. Next one says, what about the line weight and rods? In over 40 years fly fishing, I've seen the norm go from 8.5 foot cane casting to 6 weight to people swearing by 10 feet carbon 3 weights. It's a personal choice. It's the longest rods, the 10-foot rods. It's something that some of our members, they prefer it because they can clear the fringe, the vegetation. I personally don't go over 9. And I certainly
No,
don't use.
nine's plenty. I have an 8 foot, which is my go-to. I think 10 foot can have its place if you wanted to hold the line up off the water. If you've got fast water in front of you and your fly's in some slower water, if you want to reach over with that rod, there's lots of reasons why a 10 foot can have its place. Some of our waters, you would really struggle with a 10-foot rod. Light line weights, yes. But you can catch fish with a 4 or a 5 weight. I've got a 5 weight on a 4 weight rod at the moment. I bought myself a new line this year, which is the first time in years. I should have been banned for the state of that last fly line. And I bought a brand new one, a 5 weight on a 4 weight rod. It's a Streamlight, and it's a lovely thing. It's just for those roll casts. For most of the distances that we need to cast here are fairly short, and most of the weight of that line is in the front. So it's a 5 weight on a 4 weight rod. It's fine because with a decent leader, that's not going anywhere near the fish.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I mean, I do know some of our members, they like very light rods, like 3 weight and 2 weight, and that's a personal choice. In reality, though, fish in the mayfly in particular, they're big fish. They're well fed. They'll give it all. If you're going to return the fish, there's not much point in fuffing about with a 2 weight and a 3 weight rod. You just bring it much quicker with a 5 weight. And by the way, if you're going to be lining fish with your line, yes, of course, I understand why not you use 5 or 6, etc. But that's not the point. The point is avoiding the lining. And so hence the leaders, that's the important thing. They don't force lining, well the presentation. So the line weight, it's almost irrelevant.
Yeah. It's what you feel comfortable in the hand, really. And I've tried I think I had a 6 foot 3 weight. I've still got it. But it sits in the corner now because I used it for a while and then I thought, no, don't really like it. I didn't have the feel, and each to their own.
So the next one is an interesting one from Charles. Look, what size can you take? You don't actually say what size in the book. Take a fish.
Did we not? That's interesting.
We got it in.
There's a statutory taking size, isn't there?
Yeah, there should be in the book.
10 inches.
But in any event, size, we don't kill the. Let's say it's a very strong recommendation. Put the wild fish back and get the stockies. The stockies, they tend to be 14, 15 inches, or 1 1/4 to 1 3/4. So they are the takeable fish.
They're table fish. They are a meal. They're designed that way.
Yeah.
So those are the ones to take. We don't rule against taking wild fish, but we do strongly recommend that those fish are left in the river
and
to breed.
I think that's the last of the questions. So I think we may conclude the session. Thank you all for participating. And we will record it and it will be available in the next few days on our forum. Enjoy the Mayfly season. And if you want to come on Saturday, on the open day, we have a good gathering, about 100 people. But there'll be fish. There'll be, sorry, I've just had another couple of questions here. Page 36, minimum 10 inches.
10 inches.
So 10 inches.
Well done, Andy.
And John Newton, incredible gents. Thank you. Learned a lot. And brand new member. Thank you. Very helpful, Peter Turner. Okay, guys.
I've met a lot of new members on the banks now, and everybody's got something to say. I've met a good number of the older members as well this year. Last year was an utter washout for us. Really, the whole season was a waste because the fish never really got into the pattern. This year they are doing just what we want them to do, and new members who are coming with very little experience. And it's fair to say that those of us that have been around longer and are longer in the tooth don't realise quite how much we know. And I think we have to understand that passing on some of this stuff is very important.
We're still learning.
We're still learning.
Yeah.
And I remember that's what Graham Chalmers told us when he edited the anthology. He says, you people know it all, but you've just got to be able to write it down. There are experts in the club, so plenty of people to ask. But welcome to all the new members.
And I'm sure we'll see some of the faces that we cannot see from where we're standing now on the open day.
Yeah.
There's still spaces there. It's a good gathering, and the weather is fantastic. So
we've had
Yeah.
over 100 tonight. At one point, a few got bored, obviously, and they've dropped off now.
Good.
Good.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And
Good
tight
night.
lines. Good night.